I like it. All right, so it's 1:30 and I want to go ahead and officially hereby call this meeting to order on this Wednesday, June 21st at 1:30. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance by my Vice Chair, Mark Joseph. Pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, it's great to see all the staff here with NVTA also. Nice to see everybody. Laura, let's go ahead and begin with roll call.
Leon Garcia, Mark Joseph,
Here.
Donald Williams, Kevin Eisenberg,
Here.
Liz Alessio,
Present.
Scott Sedgley, Ann Cottrell, Paul Doring, Eric Hall, Margie Mulher,
Here.
Eric Knight. And we have a confirmed absence from Director Pedroza. We do have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. And just for clarification, this is the NVTA-TA Tax Agency Board meeting. First item on here officially is to adopt the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? And if not, do we have a motion in a second?
Moeller seconds.
Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Any nays? Thank you. Next is public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment? Not seeing any here. Do we have anybody virtually?
We do not.
Thank you. We're on to the consent agenda. We have one item on the consent agenda, and that's the meeting minutes of March 15th, pages 7 and 8. Do we have any members who wish to pull this item? And if not, is there a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Joseph.
Second. Doring.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you. On to regular agenda items. Item 7.1 is an action item. Antonio Honorado will present this, and after the presentation, we will need a motion and a second. So this is our annual financial statement with independent auditors report, and these you can find on pages 9 through 45.
All right. So good afternoon, Chair Alessio and members of the board. My name is Antonio Honorado, and I am the Director of Finance for the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. So for this item, staff is asking the board to accept and file the NVTA Tax Agency Measure T financial statements and audit, as well as the compliance and performance audits for the cities of American Canyon and Calistoga. So the financial statements themselves, which is attachment number 1, they're pretty straightforward. The tax agency, as well as the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, and as well as our various others committee, they've received reports throughout the year of the Measure T revenues that were generated in fiscal year 2022. The memo does provide a summary of the revenues generated for the fiscal year compared to the prior year. Revenues jumped by an amazing 21%, basically due to the latent demand. It was the first post-pandemic year. And then consumers were just furiously purchasing goods and hospitality and tourism and anything else that was available at the time. The memo also provides an analysis of the industry groups with the highest recovery rates during the year. It's no surprise that tourism and wineries had some of the best showings, but all the industry sectors were positive for the year. I would caution not to expect a 21% growth rate for the current year as opposed to the previous year. And there are several pressure points that we are experiencing, such as inflation, higher interest rates, and high-tech sector employment receding. So I do expect for the current year, as opposed to the previous year, to still be positive in terms of growth, but more in the range of 2 to 5% in terms of the Measure T revenues. Now we'll get to the compliance and performance audits for American Canyon and Calistoga. For the most part, both cities were in substantial compliance in all areas except for 2. There are 8 criteria and 2 of them were missed. They were in the areas of record keeping and financial reporting and audits. Both had findings in each of these criteria. For financial reporting, the criteria was that the annual comprehensive financial report, formerly called the CAFR, was submitted late. Now, both cities had some vacancies in their finance departments. And so those reports that were submitted, supposed to be submitted to the state, usually by the end of the calendar year, they were just simply missed, just because of the fact of the lack of resources. That being said, it's not a systemic issue, and it's not expected to reoccur the next time both cities have their audits for the next review. The other issue was record keeping. So the auditors audit Measure T projects, not the general ledger of the jurisdiction. The auditors had a hard time actually verifying the financial transactions for a specific Measure T project under review. Doesn't mean they can verify that a financial transaction has occurred. It's just they can link that transaction to the Measure T project. And that's simply a reporting issue. Basically, the solution to that is to have a cover letter on top of the supporting documentation showing what the expense that has occurred and linking that to a Measure T audit, a Measure T project. At the time, as I said again, the finance directors for the respective cities were unaware. They're fairly new and they're unaware of this type of reconciliation. And so the auditors had a hard time verifying that those transactions did occur for that specific project. It's a minor issue, it's a procedural issue. We spoke with both cities and they are aware of that the next time around, that it's a simple fix. So with that being said, these were, as I said, these findings were more minor and they're easily correctable. This is the end of my report for this item. I will say the next two jurisdictions subject to the compliance and performance audits are going to be the cities of Napa and the town of Yountville. So Salina comes after the next year after that. So with that, I do conclude my report and I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we've all our jurisdictions, all the cities and towns have experienced a high turnover. And in our finance department, certainly. And the complexities of tweezing out, which doesn't sound like it'd be complex, but it is if you don't have the right kind of software system to help you, a city, manage all those finances and all the different fundings that come into all these projects. I could see the complexities, and this was a good moment to learn and improve the process there, the procedure. Are there any questions? Yes, Don.
Yes, that's correct. There was turnover in Calistoga regarding the financial accounting system. If these are minor issues, what does a major problem look like? It looks to me like, this could compromise the quality of an NVTA report if these details weren't, discovered, unearthed. And so if these are not significant, what is the significant?
At the other end of the extreme, fraud would be significant. Intentional fraud would be significant. And that would be a red flag. So, and that's where the sampling comes and why it's important that these findings, usually they lead to additional sampling and additional findings, but because these are so minor, these are mainly procedural. It didn't lead to anything other than a simple corrective action.
And how frequently are the audits conducted on each agency?
Every 3 years.
Every 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Yes, Vice Chair Joseph.
Yes, well, I'll confirm in American Canyon, we just brought on a brand new finance director. So I'm sure these will work themselves out. Going forward, these types of record keeping problems, I think, could be typical. So are you kind of letting everyone else know that, oh, by the way, here's how you got to do it so you don't get, it's kind of like saying, the other jurisdictions ought to get the benefit of what we learned.
Oh, absolutely. So we just had a technical advisory committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, and these findings were also shared in that group as well. So they're aware of the operational issues as well as the financial reporting issues of these two jurisdictions, and that kind of gives them an awareness that the next time around, especially for Napa and for Yountville, these are the these are the criteria that the auditors are looking at.
Okay, perfect. Then totally unrelated, I got a text from Leon Garcia. He's on his way. So
Thank you. And Director Knight has also arrived. So
I apologize, Chair Alicia, for being a little bit late. I was going to late start from Yountville, but there's some road work being done at Oak Knoll and Big Ranch and Saw-Skull. So
great.
takes a little more time,
That's it.
but
Progress.
good to see that they're working on those roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Knight. Any other questions on the topic? Yes, Director Doring. And Director Doring, go ahead and turn your mic on too, if you don't mind, just so.
Tony, do you
on.
want to, let me
Oh,
grab
There you
that.
go. Thank you.
So Director Doring, there isn't anything specific. I mean, we honestly, all the audits to date have been with the large jurisdictions and they've been able to, they have more sophisticated accounting systems. And so we are going to update our policies and procedures to make it clear that we need to have at least a manual accounting of that in the future.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Well, I just as a kind of a FYI, Mayor Sedgley and I, we had our Napa City Council meeting last night, and Dr. Eiler, who's an economist, well respected in the area out of Sonoma State University, kind of gave us a view and projection of what's ahead economically. And a couple points he mentions is just that inflation remains to be stubborn, but things are looking more on the positive than on the negative side, but we'll just be watchful on a few things on that. So thank goodness Napa Valley is a global destination and people love to come here. So if there's nothing more, I think we can ask for a motion and a second to approve this item.
so moved, Joseph.
I think it's an accept and file.
Oh, I thought it was action.
Yeah.
It says it's I'm showing that
Accept and
this is an
file.
action item. Okay.
Okay.
So if not needed, then very good. Then we accept it. Thank you.
I'll take back my motion.
That's action there. Okay. Are there any future agenda items from the directors? No? Okay. Then I hereby call this meeting adjourned at 1:43. And our next regular meeting of the NVTA-TA will be July 19th of 2023. Moving on to our regular board meeting of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. We've already done roll calls, and we've added Director Knight to that. So Laura, we're fine moving past that, correct?
Sure, let's call it to order first.
Call it to order at 1:43. Okay, so we're calling this meeting to order at 1:43.
And I can confirm that roll call was confirmed at the preceding NVTA-TA meeting with 3 absences, including the confirmed absence of Member Collette, and there are no requests for remote participation.
Thank you very much. Do we have any changes to this agenda? And if not, if we can have a motion and a second to approve?
So moved, Joseph.
Second, Eisenberg.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. Moving on to public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on the NVTA agenda or items that are not on this agenda? Nobody here present? Nobody virtually? Okay, thank you. Now we're on to item number 5, which is the chairpersons, which I don't have a report, board members, MTC and ABAG. I don't see our MTC or ABAG representative, but Kate, you have something you want to share on this? Okay.
I'll do the MTC Commissioner report. Good afternoon, everybody. The California Transportation Commission unanimously approved the application submitted earlier this spring by the Bay Area Infrastructure Financing Authority on behalf of the partners that work on State Route 37 for authorization to operate a toll facility on Highway 37 between Mare Island, Vallejo, and the junction with State Route 121 at Sears Point in Sonoma County. That was a heavy lift and everybody participated. So it was really with great cheer that we were able to get that approval. The Programming and Allocations Committee referred to the commission for approval two regional measure 3 allocations to NVTA. One for $20 million for the North Bay Transit Program for the Vine Maintenance Facility reimbursements, and one for $20 million for State Route 29 South County improvements for Saskville Junction reimbursements. We are not going to be able to get all those cash. We only will get back what we've expended to date, which is pretty significant. I think at last count is around $47 million. And we will be ultimately using those funds because we had other funds in place of these to deliver those projects for other projects. And we will bring that back to this board probably September. You've already received, in 2018, you received a pretty comprehensive list of projects that we would prioritize with these funds. Not much has changed, but we will refine it and talk to you about it then. MTC staff provided an update on the housing incentive pool. The program will award transportation funds to 15 jurisdictions that produced or preserved the greatest number of affordable housing units from 2018 to 2022. Adjustments to the final report are still underway, and MTC anticipates distributing the awards in 2024. I'm sorry, Mayor Garcia is not here to listen to this, but Vice Chair Mark Joseph is here. So American Canyon remains near the top of the standings to receive funding, and they're actually in 6th place. And that's for all 110 jurisdictions in the Bay Area. So congratulations to American Canyon. I don't think the standings are going to change much, but you'll still be within the 15.
So the claim is we are number 6.
You're number 6, right?
All right.
You're number 6. Well, you're number 1 in the Valley. How's that? The MTC Planning Committee and ABAG Administrative Committee received an update on the Next Generation Bay Area Freeways study. And I just wanted to bring this to your attention because it's something that's not going to affect us directly, but it's certainly going to affect people that come in and go out of the valley on the region's freeways. The study is intended to evaluate and implementing pricing strategies on Bay Area freeways and urban areas to reduce vehicle miles traveled. The study was kicked off in 2022, and the report was largely focused on information gathered in round 1 of the public engagement process. And most of the feedback that was received voiced frustration about traffic and concerns about affordability issues associated with tolling. The proposal for the first round of analysis includes 3 pricing strategies: cordon pricing around major urban centers, all lane highway tolling in transit-rich corridors, and all lane highway and arterial tolling in transit-rich corridors. The study was first implemented, as I mentioned, in 2022, and will be completed in the winter of 2024. And I am sure that MTC staff or one of us will provide you with a full report when that report is published. The Bay Area Housing Finance Authority received a grant from Google LLC in the amount of $2.5 million to fund the Doorway Housing Portal. That's a program that serves as a one-stop shop for housing for all Bay Area residents. So it's a really great place, especially if you're struggling to find housing, because it'll do everything for you. It'll help submit the application, identify revenues for you to fund your rent, and a few other things. So, and that concludes the commissioner report.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions on that or any other updates the directors would like to offer? Okay, not seeing any. So Kate, now we're officially on to you for executive director report. If you have anything additional you'd like to share.
I do. Of course I do. NVTA completed the first Federal Transit Administration triennial review in over 4 years. The delay was the result of the pandemic. We had 6 minor findings, all of which were procedural in nature. I think the results of the review are really laudable given how many contracts we have right now and how much our staff has turned over. And so particularly because we have the TIFIA loan on the Vine Bus Maintenance Facility, bus procurement. And I just wanted to acknowledge staff for the hard work and how diligent they are and how thorough they are. So specifically Tony Honorato,
Thank you, Tony.
Rebecca Shank, Libby Payan, But a special kudos, and she's not even down here, but to Renee Kulik, who oversees our procurement. No findings in procurement, and millions and millions and millions of contracts have gone through. So kudos to all of them. Bottle Rock ridership over the weekend at Bottle Rock this year was 5,771 unlinked passenger trips in total. This compares to 4,131 last year, a roughly 40% increase over the 2022 unlinked passenger trips. It was still 48% lower than pre-pandemic ridership figures, but we think part of that has to do with the on-demand services that we're providing right now, and that we did not extend evening service to those areas during Bottle Rock. So because we were planning on restoring service, and I'll let Rebecca talk about this later, up to almost 88% of our service pre-pandemic, next year's figures we anticipate are going to be much better. On Saturday, June 10th, Diana, Rebecca, Tony, and Valerie tabled at the Napa Farmers Market to promote the Vision Zero survey, which is now concluded. We do plan to return to the Farmers Market in August or before, when we'll promote the new changes to the Vine Transit system. And last but not least, I'm happy to report that I met with the new president and CEO of the Hispanic Chamber, and we have since joined it as an agency. And we are planning some outreach workshops. The first will be about what and how to become a disadvantaged business enterprise, and how to work with larger contractors to get government business. And that concludes my report.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Not
Just
seeing-
one comment.
Yes, Dr. Knight.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Director Miller and Program Manager Rebecca Schenk for attending the Yountville Council meeting last night, giving us a report on the work you do for us and an update on the Yountville Beeline. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, Dr. Eisenberg.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I rode the bus from Calistoga to Bottle Rock 6 times that weekend, 3 times down, 3 times back. And other than being a bit hectic getting out of Napa, it was wonderful and much better than driving.
That I see big smiles from staff on that. Thank you very much, Dr. Eisenberg. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Yes, anybody else? No? Okay. Very good. Now we have a Caltrans update. I see Amani is joining us virtually.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, directors and members of the board. This is Amani, Caltrans Regional Project Manager for Napa County. Regarding to the report, we have an active 38 projects in multiple phases. And if we start with the project initiation report, we have 3 projects in the PID phase, and one of them is the 2W880. This is in page 1. This is in Napa 128. And this project is for resurfacing the asphalt concrete, drainage restoration, and complete street elements with a total project cost of 18.8 million. This initiation document will be completed tentatively by August 2023. For the environmental phase, we have 7 projects. There's nothing highlighted now, which is all are going on track. It's just to pick 2 of them, which is the 4Q010. This is the multimodal corridor improvements in the City of American Canyons, and District 4 Director Dina, she approved using the 1 million settlement between the City of American Canyons and Caltrans, and the letters has been forwarded to NVTA and the City of American Canyons. From our side, Caltrans is working with the budget to see how NVTA can access this amount. And the second environmental, the 0J890, this is the Severado 5-way intersection, and the co-op agreement is now with the City of Napa legal team for review. Going to the design phase, which is in page number 2, we have 15 projects, and Caltrans are working hard to RTL some of the projects and request fund allocation to commence with construction phase for the August CTC meeting. And one of them, which is highlighted here, is the 3Q760. And this is the rumble strips, which has been completed the design phase, and now we are processing with the fund request. The second project, which is in phase, in page number 3, thank you, is the 4J21A. This is the mitigation at Huchika Creek. The design has been completed, and we are processing with the fund allocation for the August CTC to commence the construction phase. The third project is 4J84A. This is Cable Creek Bridge environmental mitigation with the construction complete acceptance by November 2031 to comply with the 10-year PEP establishment according to the CDFW and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Going to page number 4, we have the last, which has been updated, is the 0Q810. This is a storm damage in County of Napa. And this, we received the right-of-way certification yesterday, a good achievement for this project, and we are also commencing with fund allocation to this project. This is the 15 projects in the design. Going to construction, we have 13 projects, which is running now, and one of them, which has moved from design phase to construction, is the drainage improvement in the City of American Canyons, and it has been awarded to Terracon Construction Inc. Company. So this is the updates, and by this, I conclude my report. I'm willing to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. We always look forward to hearing from you and hear what's new. So thank you for that. Yes, Vice Chair Joseph.
Thank you for the report. One of the questions on the drainage improvements in American Canyon, the culverts, is that, where exactly are those culverts? Is that by the overpass on the railroad overpass, or do you know?
Did you capture the project EA number?
Oh, EA 4J410.
Yeah, 4J410. Yes, this is the drainage improvements in City of American Canyon. It's between, so it's a rehabilitation culverts, yes, between post mile 1.7 and 5.1. And so your question is related to upgrading the culverts?
Right. We have some culverts that are right associated with the overpass, the railroad overpass. And I'm wondering if those are the culverts that are being fixed, or?
Let me double check.
Or this may be something we can figure out offline. I don't want to take up too much time.
Yeah, actually, it shows in that it's in a various locations, so we can, it's the Sheehy Creek Culvert Rehab in a various location. If you want exactly these locations, I can share it with you.
Okay. Fair, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Director Sedgley. Oh, Mark, would you help him find the button? There you go.
Speak, and I'm not sure if this information is readily available either, but in design on the Tulicate Creek Bridge on Sosco Avenue, when Caltrans replace these bridges, do they save the native stone rails that are part of those bridges? And there's several in the county that are stone bridges that still have I know Tulicate does on Sosco, and I just don't know. Hopefully, through cultural means that we try to save those, but I don't know if we do or not, and if Tulicate is going to just be designed with that gone or not.
Well, I'm personally interested because I have family, great grandfather that was a stonemason that helped build some of the bridges in the area. Monty, do you know what they do with the remnants of the older bridges, especially the more historic stone bridges?
Do they save it?
Do they save that? Can you look into that and let us know?
Yes, for sure. I'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah, with a request to save.
Thank you.
I'll give you Director Sedgley's address.
Yes,
later.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Alessio,
Yeah,
Director
you get it.
Knight.
just to follow up that on Mayor Sedgley's, I know there's in walking across that bridge, there's a plaque on there, a historic plaque naming the members that were and probably staff. So maybe that's what you mentioned, but it would be nice to save that as well, or.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. So we, once again, we thank you. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Yes, hopefully. Thank you.
Be well, stay safe. We're moving on to our public hearings, 8.1. This is a public hearing approval of a resolution amending the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget, and Antonio Honorado is going to be walking us through this in his pages 9 through 28.
So once again, Antonio Honorado, Director of Finance for NVTA. So for this public hearing, staff is asking the board to approve resolution 2318, which is attachment number 2, carrying over $28,284,100 from the current fiscal year 22-23 and amending the next fiscal year beginning on July 1st, 2023 as budget and appropriation limit to $60,268,000. So I've prepared a brief slide presentation for this item. So before we talk about the budgets, I wanted to talk a little bit about the budget cycle. Except for Director Alicio, Sedgley, and Doring, all the new directors are brand new. And NVTA's budgetary cycle is a little bit more unique than what you would see in your own jurisdictions. So we actually have a 2-year budget cycle, a biannual budget. And the budget is actually a 2-year plan. And what we do is we front load the budget in the first year of the 2-year plan. What that does for us is it optimizes our resources and allows us to make changes quickly without having to go to the board on a monthly basis to ask for those changes. What this does is it gives us, a lot of flexibility to make those changes very quickly, and it makes us more nimble, and we're able to deliver those projects in a timely fashion. Any unused balances in that first year, any remaining balances, then we come back to the board, which is already pre-authorized, and we ask the board to reallocate the unused balances from the first year to the second year. And that's where we are right now. So in the first box right there, we actually started the current budget cycle in January of 2022. The budgets were adopted in May for the next 2 years out. In the packet itself, you have a very detailed analysis of the current approved budget for the current fiscal year, where we think we're going to land at the end of this month for the current fiscal year, the remaining balances, and that's where you see the check mark right now is for this public hearing. We're asking the board to carry over a portion of that remaining balance into the final year of the budgetary process. So next slide, please. But before we begin, I just wanted to show you the menu of funding that our agency receives, both on the transit and the transportation side of the house. We receive funding from federal sources, state sources, as well as local sources, and we get special on-time grants, or we get contributions from member agencies, or in this case here for now, the Vine Trail Coalition. And out of both funds, the transportation side and the transit side, we have one funding source, Transportation Development Act funds, that can be used for both operations, for transit, for transportation, as well as for capital. I did also highlight that specific funding source because of one major factor. It's the only funding source where funds are advanced to us. All the other funding sources you see here is on a reimbursement basis, which means we can wait a while before we get that money back to us, which means we have to carry those costs. And in some respects, we have to carry those costs for over a year before we get ourselves paid back. So cash management is very critical for us, and having Transportation Development Act advance funds to us is critical for us to deliver projects in a timely fashion. Just one other example, Federal Transit Administration funds on the transit side, we don't get those reimbursements until after the fiscal year is over. So that's up to $4 million in costs that we have to carry. So it's our cash flow is, we're focused on it. We manage it pretty effectively. I do have a slide at the end of the presentation show what our current cash availability is. So it gives you a little bit of confidence that we are managing our cash effectively. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the agenda itself has a very detailed analysis of our budgets, but this gives you a little bit of a snapshot of where we're at and what next year's budget, what we're asking the board to adjust the budget for next year looks like. So the approved budget for the first year in the first 2 or 3 columns right there shows the approved budget for the first year was 90,316,000. As I said, we front loaded the budget in the first year. And then we're probably going to land at the end of the current year at around $53 million, $53 million once all is said and done, which means we have a remaining balance, a carryover balance about $37 million. Now for the next year, we had a pre-approved budget of just under $32 million, 31,983. With the adjustment, what I'm asking for is to carry over only 28 of that $37 million. And the reason for that is because, you know, we know that's what our current needs are. We're not asking for anything more. We're not asking for anything else. The second year of the biennial budget, we know what our resources are. We know where funding is going to come from. So it's a little bit more of a transparent budget. It's still a carryover, but we know what we're able to achieve and what we're able to accomplish in the second year of the budgetary cycle.
Excuse me, can I butt in for a quick? So that $7 million quote unquote savings, is that a real operating savings or is that just?
Well, it's an unrealized savings in the fact that we don't spend money unless we know we're going to get it back. So if we don't, it's a spending authority, but if we don't need to use it, we don't need to use it. So
thank you.
Yeah, we're not going to get a check for $7 million. We're saving the $7 million. Or spending it. We're not going to be spending an additional $7 million. Next slide, please. So this is just a general breakout of the consolidated budget, where the source of funds comes from and where what the expenditure plan is. Now it's a little bit misleading because we're taking the transportation, the general fund, and we're combining it with the public transit fund. Each of those have separate funding sources. Each of those have separate types of expenses, but putting it all together, it does give you a little bit of a global view of where the funding pots of money come from. For example, you know, federal sources account for about a third, 32%. We still have a TIFIA loan, incoming revenues for TIFIA loan for the bus maintenance facility. Transportation Development Act overall makes about a quarter of our entire revenues. Farebox makes about 2% overall, but it's a little bit higher once we get into public transit. And other funding sources, mainly for the Vine Trail, is about a quarter. And then we have state and local funds at about 11%. Down below, you'll see a breakout between the three different budgets. We have the CMA budget, or what we call the general fund, at $26,695,300, adjusted, of course, for the purposes of this meeting. We have a transit operating budget of $21,533,900, and then we have a capital budget of $12,038,800. And we'll talk about each of these elements in the next few slides. And of course, on the other side of that coin is the expenditure plan. Overall, purchase, transportation, and fuel and maintenance makes about a little bit more than a quarter of the budget. Consulting services, all those programs and projects that we outsource, a little bit more than a third, and capital about 20%, and administration takes up the rest as well. Next slide, please. So this shows the general fund, or the CMA's budget, and its funding sources and expenditure plan. I'll go towards the expenses because that's probably a little bit more real to us, and you can understand where it's coming from. But the CMA expenses is really for the Vine Trail. Now, the Vine Trail was a capital project because it's not an agency asset, it's considered a general fund expenditure. So this is where it's going to land. So that's why you see $12 million for the Vine Trail. And of course, you know, as we all know, that the Vine Trail started late last year. There's been through some delays, so the majority of the construction will be in the upcoming fiscal year. And we've set aside a budget of about $12 million for that. We have consulting services at just under $10 million, and that's the whole array of projects and programs that we outsource to third parties. We'll have a top 5 here in just a minute, and I'll show you. Personnel costs accounts for just under $4 million, total personnel costs, and then we have overall agency administration, what it takes to just oversee all our programs and projects for both for NVTA and for the public transit system. So total adjusted budget we're asking this board to adjust the budget to 26,695,000. Next slide, please. So in your agenda packet, there is a comprehensive list of special projects. These are the top 5. As I mentioned, the biggest one is the Vine Trail project. We also have, Saskell Junction, administrative oversight, not the construction portion, but that's the administrative oversight that the agency has taken on. We have a budget for State Route 29 improvements, Napa Forward, modifications to the Saskell Gateway Transit Center, and then all other special projects combined comprises about $4.1 million. And that's where you see in the general fund, the line item for consulting or professional fees at $21,652,000. As I said, there's a more comprehensive list in your agenda package if you want to see what the comparisons were from last year to this year and what accounts for the entire $21 million. Next slide, please. Going on to public transit. You can see that actually, so for public transit, we're actually going to ask for an increase in what the original budgeted costs were up to $21,534,000. But if you take out depreciation, operational costs is closer to $17,989,000. I always take out depreciation because we don't pay a vendor called depreciation, but it is considered an operating expense on our books. So it has to be added, but I do take it out to show what the true cost of running the public transit system is. But overall, purchase transportation contract and fuel combined together, it says here 72%, but that includes the depreciation. If you stripped out depreciation, our purchase transportation and fuel costs counts for over 90% of our public transit operations. Maintenance takes up about 5%, and then we have administration for another 5%. And then we also have a new line item, debt service, and that's a TIFIA loan for the bus maintenance facility. But overall, the budget that we're asking for you to do is to adjust it up to $21,534,000 for the transit system. There is an increase, as I mentioned. I think Rebecca, our transit manager, will talk about what those increases entail, but it's really the restoration of services and the expansion of some services that we're able to accommodate for the upcoming fiscal year based on our known revenues that we expect to get for the year. Next slide, please. Wanted to briefly talk about capital investments. I know it's blocked out here, but it is our capital investments. So all our capital investments, $43 million was approved for the first year. We're going to use about half of that this year, mainly for the bus maintenance facility. This year, I'm asking for a carryover balance of $12 million, mainly for the bus maintenance facility. And as you can see down below, it's a little bit what the different portions of our capital investments are. But most of it's going to go towards the bus maintenance facility, the completion of the bus maintenance facility, which we expect to be in service either late this calendar year or, crossing our fingers, early next calendar year. So board members had an opportunity to go tour the bus maintenance facility. It's humming along great. Looks like we are able to move in tomorrow if we can, but it's a sight to be seen. So we're very proud of that. All right, next slide, please. So this is the last slide. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, cash flow is very important to us because almost all our funding is based on a reimbursement basis, except for Transportation Development Act fund. Now, that being said, we're actually entering the current year in a very strong financial position. We had about $12.7 million at the county's treasury. That's cash that's used for current projects at the time. There were some set asides for the Vine Trail. We got some contributions from the county and Calistoga and St. Helena that were set aside and won't be used until we're at the point where those expenses match up with the revenues. But we do have about 12.7. We started the year with about $12.7 million. And then, obviously as things come along, that cash is being used. And then at the end of the year, we are going to end the year at $11.2 million. Now, that being said, it looks like there's a precipitous drop between Q3 and Q4 from 16 to 11 million. And that's just because the large AR we're going to post for Q4 because we're expecting all that cash in Q4 to materialize in Q1 of next year. So you don't see Q1 of next year here, but it's going to go from 16 to 11 million. It'll probably go back up to around 15, 16 million at the end of the Q1 of the next year. But what I also wanted to say too is we do have Transportation Development Act unallocated funds held at the county treasury and administered by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission that we can tap into if we really needed to as well. And we also have a $5 million line of credit for operations or for capital purchases as kind of a short-term bridge loan until we get those reimbursements back. So at the end of the day, we have about $21 million of cash available that we can tap into pretty quickly if we needed to. So even though cash flow is very important to us and it's very volatile throughout the year because sometimes we have more money going out than we have coming in, we are effectively managing our cash to a point where I see it almost weekly just to make sure that we're not running into an uncomfortable position where we have to tap into other resources to ensure that we pay our vendors promptly and then patiently wait to get ourselves paid back. Next slide, please. So with that being said, that does conclude my report and I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. That was really helpful. And I think you could do that kind of explanation each year. I think it's, and to hear the philosophy, you know, behind how you manage the cash flow, how you set the budget, you front load while you do that, and what you're asking for today. So do we have any directors with questions? Yes. Don.
Yes, thanks for the report. I see that the fare box revenue is as low as 2 or 5% of the total picture on the pie. Are we approaching the point where the cost of collecting the revenue from the fare, collecting it and monitoring it is greater than the revenue itself, or are we not that close?
We're not that close. I mean, it's 2% overall, but if you look at the public transit system itself in isolation, our fare box is about 5%, which is still not great because before the pandemic, it was hovering around 12 to 15%. It just shows we still have a lot of challenges with getting our passengers back, and we're trying to make every effort possible to make public transit more attractive. And Rebecca will have a report on that momentarily. The nice part is that our fare box doesn't affect our operations to a great extent, and the cost of administration is pretty low. It's pretty incremental. So the cost of administration is much lower than the cost of actually getting those funds over to us. Mm-hmm.
That was a very good question. And Napa's not unique. This is not just Bay Area, it's statewide. Trying to get folks back onto transit. It's been very challenging. Yes, Director Garcia.
Yes, I was interested in seeing the fuel cost, 15 million. Is that right?
15 or 1.5, 1 million, 1.5.
1.5 million, sorry.
1.5 million.
So when we go all electric, how much are we saving?
Don't know yet because we only have a few months worth of data on the electric vehicles that are on the road today.
Mhm.
I will say that fuel costs are expected to peak this year or next year and then going down just because we're converting our fleet from diesel and gas to electric. And electric as a fuel, we should see an impact in terms of cost savings. But right now, we don't have enough data to make that determination of exactly what that saving looks
So we
like.
have any ideas where we might spend those funds that we're saving?
It may be that, I mean, I don't know if I can answer that
Well,
question.
that's certainly a decision the board is going to make, but it seems like if we have a savings in the transit side, that we ought to be plowing it back into transit operations.
I would agree. Yeah, it's just good to have that amount of savings being out there in the future. The benefit of going electric. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Garcia. Yes, Director Cottrell, welcome to the board here.
Thank you, Chair. It's nice to be here. Thank you for the presentation, and I'm wrapping my head around the 2-year budget cycle. So my question was just, given that we're in the middle of this cycle, and you've talked a little bit about cash flow always being a challenge, this question about a slight upward trend in the fare box, and then fuel costs peaking and then leveling out. Just wondering if you could speak to any forecasting that you might be able to share with us for the future 2-year budget.
I'm glad you asked that question, actually. So we do have a 3 to 5 year financial outlook that I am currently reassessing right now. It will come to the board soon for an update, and we will show scenarios of where we think we're going to be in the next 3 to 5 years. And in the event that we have opportunities for growth, or there may be reductions of services, what they may actually look like. So we do have scenario forecasting, but it's currently under development. So it's just gonna have to wait and see.
We'll stay tuned. All
Stay
right,
tuned.
thanks.
Thank you, Director. Director Doring.
Thank you. So I noticed that there are some potential cost overruns associated with the Vine Trail from St. Helena to Calistoga. Is that built into this current budget?
The current budget is what was already pre-approved by this board. So if there are any cost overruns, I believe our engineer has a presentation on that a
I
little
saw
bit
that,
later.
yeah. Yes.
He can talk about those, but the current budget that we have is the budget that was already pre-approved by the board previously and doesn't assume any new costs.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And one of the things I'm struggling with, it's not really a budget matter, but it's more of how information is presented to us. So for example, if there's a project that has overruns and, then you look at the staff report and you're looking at the fiscal impact and, these pots of gold, it's very daunting for anybody who sits here to try to figure out where they come from and what's available. And I struggle all the time when there's a situation where, we're going to tap into your phraseology into a particular account like the TDA funds. But the thing that happens when we do that, we don't, as a board, we don't always know, what are we giving up? What is the loss there? What other project won't we be doing because we're going to use those funds to repair an issue or deal with an overrun? Just maybe you could talk about that. It would be more helpful going forward. I don't have a solution. I just recognize being on this board as long as I've had, I always struggle with that. It's like, what is it that we're losing when we make that decision? And it's not always clear to me.
So, the only thing I would say right now is that a lot of times our projects are funded with grant funds, and those are funds that don't touch what would be considered our general fund account, which is planning money that we get from block grants every year. And in the case of the Vine Trail, which Grant will go over in great detail in his presentation, that onus is on the jurisdictions who participate on the funding part of that.
I was getting to that.
Yeah, that doesn't come from our pot of money. So, and so, yeah, but that's actually really good feedback. And I think one of the things that we ought to be doing when we bring you items, when we are at requesting additional money, to just let you know, in the case of the maintenance facility, which also Grant is going to be presenting on, that was money you were already earmarked for the maintenance facility. So we're not giving up anything other than, I suppose we could use that money for operations, but we have to complete the maintenance facility. So anyway, we'll endeavor to do that, I think, when we need to ask you for more money on something.
All right. Thank you.
Director Doring, it depends. And there is the art of accounting, especially fine accounting too. And NVTA does a great job. Thank you for that feedback. Yes.
If
Director-
I
Vice
can
Chair.
weigh in, I think the other way to look at it is it will simply delay a project because, the importance doesn't go away, but it may be another year because, you have to reaccumulate cash. So worst case scenario is usually just delaying something.
Which is, the other reason we always ask for a contingency, right? So that we actually have earmarked that money and that because it does become a serious problem for us because our money is very specific to what we can use it for. So going in and doing a project without having that really significant buffer presents a lot of problems.
Yeah, thank you. Those restricted funds really are required to go to those areas. Any other questions? Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item for this hearing? Anybody? I don't see anybody
We have
Virtually
none.
either. Okay, very good. So this is a two-part recommendation by staff. Part one is the approve the resolution 23-18 rolling over 28, is that 28,284,100 from fiscal year 2022-23 and amending the fiscal year 2023-24 budget and appropriation limit to 60,268,000. The second part is just the holding of the hearing to amend this item for fiscal year 2023 budget and increase appropriations limit to the 60,268,000. If we have a motion, a second.
I'll make the motion to approve the resolution.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that part one and part two for the hearing
Yes,
too?
because I
Okay,
think part two is just holding the public hearing.
exactly.
Which we did.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, thank you very much. We are on to the consent agenda items, which 9.1 through 9.5. Do we have any board members that wish to pull any items from the consent agenda? Did I miss something? Oh, I apologize. Thank you. Do we have a motion to officially close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second night.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and any nays? Okay, very good. Thank you for that. So onto the consent agenda. Do we have any directors that would like to pull any of the consent items 9.1 to 9.5? And if not, do we have a motion to approve in a second? Not seeing anybody pulling the items. Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Thank you,
Second.
Dor-
Garcia.
Thank you, Doring and Garcia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? All right, thank you. Okay, so Grant Bailey, we're on to presentations on the Vine Trail update. We look forward to this. This is informational only.
Good afternoon, Chair Alicio, Vice Chair Joseph, and directors of the board. My name is Grant Bailey. I am the Program Manager Engineer for the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, and this afternoon I'll be providing an update on the Vine Trail St. Helena to Calistoga construction project. Before I get going, I'd like to also introduce Executive Director of the Napa Valley Vine Trail Coalition, Sean Casey White. She's been a great partner in our efforts to get this section of the trail completed and the overall trail as well. So thanks for being here this afternoon, Sean. All right, so next slide, please, Laura. All right, so just a quick project overview. So the Vine Trail St. Helena to Calistoga project is an 8.2 mile segment of the Vine Trail, which is a class 1 bike and pedestrian facility that parallels Highway 29. It also has connections to both a state park and the Bay Area Ridge Trail. The southern terminus is in St. Helena and the northern terminus is in Calistoga. So just kind of the purpose of this presentation today is, as noted by the chair, is informational only, but wanted to give you an update on where we're at with project schedule, status, and then also inform the board and the member jurisdictions that we have identified a funding shortfall for construction. We're going to give a range of the shortfall and identify a funding strategy, which will be later brought before each board that will be, that we're proposing add funding to the project, and that item or action will be taken at a further date when we've kind of drilled down on the exact number. So next slide, please. So just to talk about some of the achievements and challenges to date. So overall, this project is a $17.7 million project. So that's all phases included, environmental right-of-way, construction, planning. And of that 17.7 million, we've obtained 13.7 million in grant funding, which is a pretty significant feat in itself. In July of 2022, the project broke ground, and in September of 2022, paving was completed in the northern reach of the project in the Calistoga section. Following a very wet winter and some significant utility delays, we resumed construction in April of 23. And we continue work, and I'll talk more about the schedule that's upcoming here in a couple slides. Some of the challenges we've incurred on this project so far have been largely utility related in the southern reaches between the CAL Fire Station at Big Tree Lane and Pratt Avenue at St. Helena. There were significant delays to progress due to a PG&E gas line replacement project that was delayed. It was supposed to be completed in May of 2022, and they just wrapped construction last month in May of 2023, about a year late. In the northern reaches of the project from the CAL Fire Station north to Dunawheel Lane, we experienced significant unforeseen utility conflicts that were also PG&E gas line related, just not shown on the plans or incorrectly marked. We also ran into some grade discrepancies with, I guess, in the last 7 years since the project was designed. The topography has shifted. There are a number of reasons that this could have come about, but by and large, we've resolved those issues and are finalizing grading in those areas prior to paving. And then I don't think I need to tell anyone here in California that we had a very wet winter, which led to about 3 months of rain delays, followed by a month dry out period before construction could resume efficiently, we'll say. Next slide, please. Just to give a quick rundown of our funding for this project. For pre-construction funds, which includes environmental right-of-way and the design phase or PS&E phase, the County of Napa, cities of Calistoga and St. Helena, the Vine Trail Coalition contributed in the funding amounts shown in the table on the screen. And then we also received grant funding to the tune of about $250,000, and total pre-construction costs was about $3.29 million. Next slide, please. And then for construction funding, just going to talk a little bit about the contributions we've received. So we have our NVTA contributed about $2.1 million in Transportation Development Act funding from our share. We also have contributions from the Bay Area Ridge Trail, the OBAG 2 program, ATP, and a STIP swap that we negotiated with the County of Napa. That's all grant funding. And then the Vine Trail Coalition contributed $1.1 million in private philanthropy funds. And the total construction funding available is $14.4 million. Next slide, please. So now I'll talk about our construction budget. So as I mentioned, we had a total available funding amount of $14.4 million. The base construction cost for the contract, which is the bid that was received from our contractor, Gelati Construction, was $12.6 million, and a construction contingency of $616,000, and then about $1.2 million in construction support, which goes to design services during construction, construction management, and environmental monitoring and some other activities. The current available contingency as of about a week ago is $350,000. However, I will note that since the beginning of the project, we've realized cost savings of about $450,000 through scope modifications. The initial bid came in high, and so from the very beginning of the project, we looked for areas where we could bring down our costs, negotiate value engineering cost proposals with our contractor, and we were fairly successful in that effort. Next slide, please. And now here's kind of the main reason why I wanted to bring this information to the boards and jurisdictions. Despite the cost savings we've realized and the efforts we've made, we are still forecasting an additional need for this project of approximately $500,000 to $800,000. This presentation, or NVTA, is proposing a funding share breakdown based on the table above, which is Napa County 37%, Calistoga and St. Helena 19%, and the Vine Trail Coalition 25%. This allocation is based on the original funding agreement that was established for the project during the, I think, environmental and planning phase. This ask would double our contingency to the more standard 10% of the construction base bid amount. And that's certainly typical for a project of this size and nature. I will note that this does not assume PG&E pays the claim that we have submitted to them. We are currently negotiating approximately $150,000 to $200,000 claim we have submitted to PG&E. We're working to finalize that cost and hope to do so in July. And this ask also will only invoice for the actual expenses incurred. So any remaining funding will be returned to the jurisdictions accordingly. Next slide, please. Now on to our schedule. So as I mentioned, in April of 23, we resumed work following a winter and utility suspension. In the month of June, we resumed work in waterways, building box culverts and 3 bridge structures. In July, we're targeting a soft opening in Reach 7, which is in Calistoga. I have also received word that as of today, the contractor is considering starting some paving work in about half the project length by the end of July. That's not firm by any means, but it is certainly a potential at this point, which would push up the next line item, which is a September 23 trail paving. While some paving may occur in July, we are anticipating that the trails should be effectively paved out and all but complete in September, followed by final safety features and trail elements to be installed in October and a grand opening in November of this year. However, there's about half the project we haven't uncovered at this point or broken ground on. It's possible we could incur additional delays due to unforeseen circumstances. And if we do, the grand opening could be pushed out further. Next slide, please. Final slide, I'll note that NVTA and our member jurisdictions have been working to establish a trail opening plan with a robust outreach program, working with our contractor, the Vine Trail Coalition, through a number of programs, including a trail ambassador program, where we have a member of the coalition board writing the alignment on the weekends and providing friendly reminders to folks who may be using the trail before it's fully open. We also have information on NVTA and the coalition's website about trail closures and construction updates. We're releasing infographics through the open space district at both Bothay State Park in coordination with the open space district, and we're working with the Calistoga and St. Helena chambers to continue notification, as well as CHP, Napa Sheriff, and Calistoga Police Department. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Grant. So I imagine we might have some questions. Yes, Director Doring.
So just to be clear, what would be the ask of the jurisdiction, either Calistoga or St. Helena, 19% of the 800,000 or some other figure?
So right now, the $800,000 figure is conservative, I would say, and I'm hopeful for closer to the 500,000. But considering how much work there is left to be done at this time, we wanted to give a range and not have any surprises when we make the formal ask. And so that would translate to somewhere between 100,000 and I think 150,000. Sorry, having trouble with math on here.
I kind of looked at it like 700,000, and for your jurisdiction, it'd be 133,000. If it was at 700,000, give you a range.
Thank you.
Yes, Director Eisenberg.
Yes, there'd be no accommodation for the difference in population of the two jurisdictions when assessing the costs.
That's a possibility. The strategy that we have come up with so far is for a share was based on the original agreement that all the jurisdictions agreed to. And so that's where we started with our proposal.
Yes, Director Williams.
The question on the Vine Trail of speed control has come up a couple of times now. Who's going to be monitoring the faster vehicles, I'll say, our electric vehicles, electric bicycles going to be allowed on the trail? And who's going to be enforcing limits, or are there limits posted? What's the discussion on that?
Kate, I'm going to defer to you on this one. I'm sorry.
So there's been some restrictions associated with easements that the county entered on this alignment, having to do with certain vehicles. There is state legislation that basically assigns the local jurisdiction to determine that. And recently there has been a lot of discussion among your staffs, city managers at the city manager level, of what is the standard, what are other jurisdictions are doing, and Diana Meehan is collecting that information right now. The MTC has also come up with like a policy package for jurisdictions to look to on how to administer class 1 facilities. But so I know that's a very long answer to a question that we're still working on. So that's the short answer. We're still working on it, but I just wanted you to have the backstory of what we're doing.
Thank you. Is it anticipated that the electric vehicles, which can go 25 or more miles an hour, that those will be allowed?
Yes.
That's part of the discussion. And
I don't know. There's, different classes of those vehicles, and the top speed right now is 28 miles an hour. But I think everybody recognizes that those are actually a really viable way to commute long distances in the valley, especially when the Vine Trail's done. So I think that the discussion hasn't happened yet, but I think, I think that I would encourage this body, if it ever has a say in the matter, to support that for that reason.
thank you.
Thank you, Director Knight.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, if I'm understanding this correctly. So there's cost overruns on the Vine Trail, and I just don't understand why the cost overruns are the responsibility of a individual agency versus the whole agency.
When you say the individual agents.
Well, I mean, you were talking about costs that may be borne by Calistoga or
I'll turn my,
did I
if we
misunderstand
could have
that?
one mic off, we were limited on how many mics can be lit.
I'd like to respond to that. We had an agreement at the get-go of this project, how to split the costs. It was never envisioned that NVTA would fund this, but we did fund it at $2.1 million by deferring a project. And the rest of the money came from grant funds, and the large portion of the split, as you could see, was for the county and the Napa Valley Vine Trail. But that was an agreement that we reached among staff very early on when we were in the planning process of this.
Well, I appreciate that. Maybe I wasn't saying NVTA that you took on this as a separate project, but generally all the jurisdictions, I don't know. I mean, at least, the Vine Trail runs from Napa to Calistoga. I just was curious why it appears to be the responsibility of just the two jurisdictions when it's a countywide trail.
Well, I think everybody paid their part in each of their jurisdictions. That's kind of how it's been that way. American Canyon is delivering theirs without any support from anybody. Except for they have a developer that's doing a portion of it. But every other jurisdiction has graciously accepted the money that the Vine Trail Coalition has raised. But each segment has been really a separate negotiation. And I still, by and large, the biggest chunk of change has come from the state on the grants that this agency has sought and received from the Active Transportation Program.
Okay, I thank you. I'll follow up afterwards.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Director Knight, that's a good question in terms of clarification, because after this section is complete, the next section will be the Yountville to St. Helena section. So, but that is the shared, there's a shared cost that's predetermined and agreed upon. Yes, Director Cottrell.
Thank you. I wanted to just circle back with Director Williams' point about questioning speed limits and things like that. And I wanted to point out that we've got a very active section between Yountville and North Napa. And I think I'm hoping that the data and experiences we have on that will help set policy for the northern part too, because I know having spent time on that, it seems like it's working very well. And so before we overregulate, let's just make sure we get some actual on the ground data there. I'm happy to hear that the barricades will be being put into place by Gelati, because I've heard reports of people driving on that section of the trail, which
Oh,
is
wow.
frustrating. So that's great to hear. And then the other thing I just wanted to share, and maybe my colleagues are hearing this too, about people. I think as the trail's getting built and it's sort of more people are conscious of it, I've had more questions about the fact that it's crossing 29. So just looking for how we can help educate people about the why there, and what the safety measures will be before they go into place. So people, when it happens, people can say, oh, there they are,
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's a good question. And I think the why there is, one of our funding partners is the Bay Area Ridge Trail through the Coastal Conservancy, and we'll be connecting the trail or incorporating the Bay Area Ridge Trail as part of the Vine Trail through both a Napa State Park. And then as far as the crossing goes, well, the reason is to get to the park itself. And then the safety feature or the crossing signalization that's going in there is a fairly new technology referred to as a HAWK, a high intensity activated crosswalk beacon. And it is actually a stop controlled and regulated crossing that, is enforceable similar to a stop sign. And I, have actually identified that I think the need for some outreach regarding the use of that type of signal. I won't go into the detail because it's probably, it'd be easier to just distribute a flyer, which I have handy. But so I'll be working with the coalition and the jurisdictions to also distribute the proper use of that type of crossing as well, both for motorists and users of the trail.
Thank you. Great questions. Yes, Director Mueller.
Yeah, we just, to go back to the conversation about how to divide up, the funds, Yountville was the first one who, we completed we only had 1 mile, but we're
Yeah.
kind of small. So,
Yeah.
but we, kind of got it all started. And back then we paid 100% out of our own general fund for that. And the only, benefit we got was negotiated, some cost maintenance of that mile. So, I think back then it was probably like 1.3 million completely paid for, by us. Just so wish we'd waited a while and gotten some other money from somebody else. But so I'm just kind of, curious, how much does a mile cost today? Because this was
2 million,
probably,
right?
I don't know. I'm guessing like 2010, something like that. The first mile, is that about right? Do I
Yeah,
have that
well,
number?
based on the bid amount, and the contingency we'll more than likely end up using, we're probably approaching about 1.5 to, I think 2 million might be on the high end, but between
Okay.
1.5 and 2 million per
Yeah,
month.
pretty interesting. Almost could be a doubling in a decade. Anyway, those are my comments.
Yeah, it was great that Yountville took that first step and established that. I use that section. It's a really neat section of the Vine Trail. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much for this very informative update. I appreciate that, Grant. You're staying there, correct? Because now we're
Not
on to our
really.
regular agenda items, 11.1. Let's see, so this is the professional service agreement in response to requests for qualifications, 2023-R01 for on-call architect engineer and project delivery service. This is pages 65 to 129. And I'm looking, I see a note, it's an action item. I want to confirm this is an action item.
Yes, we need
Okay.
approval to authorize this
Perfect.
item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in March of 2023, NVTA released a request for proposals for on-call architectural engineering and project delivery services. The RFP requested qualified proposers in a variety of areas, including highway, roads, and intersection infrastructure, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, transit infrastructure, corridor operational efficiencies, transportation technologies, land surveying, construction management, and project management and its administration, which is service in a management support role. These types of, I guess, contracts are crucial to NVTA for delivering projects and providing engineering, architectural, and project delivery support for all the projects we deliver. In response to that RFP, we received 13 consultant proposals. Consultants were required to respond to at least one of the categories. However, many responded to several, and I think 2 responded to all 7 categories. And so today, staff is recommending that the board authorize 13 professional services agreements to various architectural and engineering design firms to provide architectural and engineering and project delivery services for a term not to exceed 5 years. And there's specific information about which firms were selected in the board packet. I'll also note that if these professional service agreements are authorized, they are available to not only NVTA, but our member jurisdictions as well. And the selection process was inclusive of the member jurisdictions for the review panel. And I guess I'll read the recommendation. Staff recommends that the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Board authorize and execute authorize the executive director to execute and make minor modifications to 13 professional service agreements for on-call architect, engineer, and project delivery services, each for a term not to exceed 5 years.
Thank you very much, Grant. Do we have any questions? Not seeing any.
Just
Yes,
one,
Dr. Darn.
Just practically speaking or logistically speaking, when you say available to the jurisdiction, what does that mean in effect?
Yeah, and I'll actually expand a little bit on the mechanics of how this contract works. So we, if the board authorizes the professional services agreements today, it creates a list of engineers, architects, and project delivery consultants that NVTA and the board, or excuse me, the jurisdictions have access to. They can release an RFP for a specific project or specific services associated with the project directly to this list. And depending on which firms are interested, they may submit a proposal, and based on the proposals received, they'll select the highest qualified proposal based on, or consultant based on their proposal.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Thank you very much. If not, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved. Joseph.
Do we have a second? Thank you. All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Great. Thank you very much. Okay. And Grant, you are still with us, I believe. Yes.
Yep. And so
11.2. Oh, this is the exciting bus maintenance facility construction contract contingency. Okay.
that's right.
So we are looking forward to this. Thank you.
I'm going to invite our consultant, Kleinfelder, Construction Services. I have 2 staff members who are part of the construction management team here to support me today. I'll be providing the vast majority of the update, but they have the detailed information on contract change orders should there be any questions. So Thomas and John, you guys want to join me up here?
Welcome, gentlemen. Please begin with introductions.
All right, so I'm still Grant Bailey, Program Manager Engineer for NVTA.
I was talking about your
Hello, thank you. I'm Thomas Fakner with Kleinfelder. I'm a program director, and on this project, I'm serving as senior construction manager.
not working. That mic wasn't,
Go ahead and say it again. It's on now. You can, okay.
Hello, all. I'm John Pollock. I'm with Kleinfelder. I am the construction engineer on the NVTA bus maintenance facility project.
All right, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Thanks, Laura. So this presentation and item is in response to a number of, I guess, previously asked items or previously requested information from the board, including kind of a rundown on the contract change orders that have been issued to date. We'll also give a budget update and then also provide a, I guess, request for, or well, we will be requesting authorization for additional construction contingency based on a funding shortfall we've forecast for this project. And just a quick reminder for the overview and purpose of this project. So this is the bus maintenance facility, which is a project to replace our existing outdated facility with a modernized 6 bus bay maintenance building, operations center, and bus wash facility in South Napa off Devlin Road on Sheehy Court. I have also added a fair number of, I guess, progress photos throughout this slide deck just to kind of break up the tables and numbers and give the board an idea of kind of where we started and kind of how we've progressed so far. So the 2 photos here, taken about a year apart, some aerial images. On the left, we have the foundation excavation complete there, very neat and tidy site. And then on the right, taken about a year later in March of this year, is the maintenance facility itself. And if you look closely, there's actually an active construction pour going on at the very bottom of the photo with a concrete pump there. So kind of some interesting photos there. So next slide, please. So first, I'm going to just talk about the project budget. I've broken down the construction budget on kind of in 2 categories: hard costs and soft costs. Hard costs traditionally are referred to as the base construction contract value or the bid contract, the bid value, and then the construction contingency, which was approved at contract award back in, I think, January of 21. Sorry, it might be 22. No, I think it was 22. Excuse me. And so the base contract value was 29.5 million. The contingency value awarded with the construction contract was 2.9 million for a total value of 32.4 million in hard costs. I will note also I have allocated and encumbered values here. Allocated are the numbers that are the values that the board appropriated in the budget. Encumbered is the value of funds that have been, I guess, tied up in a contract or through a specific award made by the board. So as far as soft costs goes, those costs refer to construction management costs. Kleinfelder Construction Services are our construction manager for this project. There's also permitting and mitigation costs, design, engineering services during construction, and legal support. The total soft costs that were allocated by the board were 3.3 million and change. The value that's been encumbered to date is 2.7 million and change. And the difference there is we have about 600,000 in available funding that has been allocated but not encumbered in the form of contracts. And so that number becomes important here as we kind of move through the request. So next slide, please, Laura. So a couple photos. Very beginning of the project there, upper photo shows the greenfield site prior to groundbreaking, and the bottom photo shows some foundation excavation that's ongoing, probably a week or 2 before that first aerial photo that I showed that showed the full maintenance building excavation area. Next slide, please. And so here's a change order log, and in, I believe it was the April board meeting, the board requested information about costs to date, specifically in the form of change orders for this project. Now, there have been 59 change orders issued to date. That would have been a challenge to show every single one of them and discuss them in this context. So the way I broke it out was every change order equal to or less than $40,000, I lumped into one line item. That's the first line item there at the top for a total of, so there's 48 total change orders there for $304,000 in total. And then there are 11 other change orders that individually are in excess of $40,000 per change order. I'm not going to talk about every single one. I think I'm going to hit the highlights here of the more expensive ones, but I'm happy to drill down on the individual change orders at the end of the presentation if there are questions. So I think the first one we'll look at is change order number 15. That change order is for $115,000. And what we did there is we extended the eastern property line of the project footprint, and that really improved the operational efficiency of our facility, allowing an additional egress point for our buses, so they can leave from not only the court at the far west side of the project, but also from the east edge of the project site as well. Then change orders 17, 30, and 31 all are related to supply chain issues, really, and they come in various. There's various reasons associated with each one, but I'll really chalk it up to supply chain issues as a result of COVID-19. The total cost there is $300,000 for electrical procurement and acceleration. I won't go into too much more detail, but I think the board has been made aware in previous meetings of the challenges we've been experiencing specifically with this item, but I'm happy to answer more questions if there are any. Change order number 44, we have the phase 1 telecommunications infrastructure, which is change order for $323,000. When the project was originally designed, staff opted to exclude a portion of the design, which was the telecommunications infrastructure, which includes hardline network access, telephone systems, connectivity throughout the building for communications, and then wireless access points as well. Once construction began, we were able to coordinate with our operator Transdev to really drill down on their needs and NVTA's needs of telecommunication infrastructure in the building, which allowed for us to develop additional design and then issue a change order to proceed with those construction changes here. I think we're working on that now. We're very close to finishing. And then I think that's kind of the high point. The high points. One last thing I'll mention is I've listed the reasoning for these change orders on the far right. You'll notice that a number of them, or a majority of them, are owner driven. And if we can go to the next slide, I've included a pie chart, really kind of breaking down the reasons for these change orders. You'll see 70% of our change order costs are owner driven or owner requested. 21%, which are those 3 change orders regarding the switchgear and electrical procurement, is attributed to supply chain issues due to COVID-19, and then 9% is associated with design errors and omissions, which is actually well below the industry standard for a project like this. Next slide, please. And then just a few more photos, progress. We have the upper photo shows the maintenance building foundation forms, and then the lower photo shows the building slab for the maintenance building with some of the initial structural steel beams being erected. Next slide, please. And so now Kleinfelder has actually put together a change order forecast. So we looked, the previous slide with the table showed change orders that have been executed as of today. And this slide shows change orders we expect to incur through the completion of the project. These numbers are not 100% solid by any means. They are forecast, but I'll go through again kind of the more expensive items here. The third one down we'll talk about is unpredictable conditions through completion. It kind of speaks for itself, and basically any instance that we come across that might add value or add costs to the overall contract that we just can't foresee at this time. The value there is not a guess, but definitely an estimation as far as function of project complete to date and the remaining value that is to be constructed of the project overall. So that's $300,000. We have telecommunications phase 2 for $125,000. So this is the second phase of that telecommunications phase 1. Phase 1 dealt strictly with interior structure components. Phase 2 will deal strictly with exterior components, primarily with providing wireless access points for data transfer for our buses when they enter the facility. It does a number of things, provides metrics on ridership, route information, and it's very certainly a needed piece of the facility. Then we have the hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle retrofit. I guess staff made the board aware of a potential upcoming change in April. This, I guess, scope item is currently being designed by our designer, and they've indicated what I think the project team thinks is a bit of a conservative cost to actually complete the work of $350,000. We hope that number comes down, but again, for the forecast, we want to try and keep these numbers conservative so we're not underrunning our requests. And then the last item I'll note is additional consultant service fees. And so that's a large number, 800,000. That value has actually already been approved by the board. It was for additional construction management services from Kleinfelder, and then also design services during construction from our design consultant, Kimley Horn. It doesn't fit perfectly in either the forecast or the change order, the executed change orders to date, but it fits better in the forecast. So this is where I put it. And, but I want to reiterate that value has already been approved by the board. We are just asking for it to be included in the overall contingency review and request. And so the total, sorry, I didn't mention this on the change orders executed to date. Change orders executed to date is about 1.3 million. The forecast value for change orders that are outstanding prior to completion of the project is 1.9 million, and that includes the additional consultant service fees. Next slide, please. Here's another kind of pie chart breakdown of our forecast change orders. Just to note, 35% of the forecast change orders are owner driven. 23% are chalked up to the unpredictable conditions, and then 42% can be attributed to the additional consultant fees. Next slide, please. Then just a few more photos here that kind of bring us almost up to date. Should have gotten one a little bit more recent, but you can see the superstructure going up there, pretty much completely erected at that point. And then the building shell on the bottom photo. If I would have taken a photo today, you would see pretty much all the glazing and glass has gone in, and there's exterior cladding on the building. It's looking like pretty close to finished exterior, minus the landscape and maybe a few other items at this point, but it's definitely moving along well. Next slide, please. So now take a look at our contingency balance. So as I noted, the original contingency for the project was 2.9 million. We have issued 3.82 million in executed change orders and are forecasting 1.9 million in additional change orders prior to project closeout. If you sum those values up, we've identified a need of about $400,000. Today, I'll be requesting 600,000 or release of the additional $600,000 that I initially identified as unallocated or unencumbered funding. And the $600,000 request, it is more than the need identified. However, I would really only like to be here one time asking for more money. And so I think strategically speaking, it makes more sense to request the available funding, all available funding that is allowed or that is unencumbered or budgeted. And thank you, Kate. I'll also note that the 600,000 was previously budgeted. There's no need to allocate funding from another place in the budget. And so we would really just be encumbering those funds at this point if you were to release them today. And so if the contingency increases request is approved, our contingency would move from 2.9 million to 3.5 million. Next slide, please. And so with that, staff is making the recommendation the board, one, authorize an additional 600,000 for construction contingency for a total contingency amount not to exceed 3.5 million. And two, authorize an increase in the executive director's change order approval authority from 2.9 million to 3.5 million. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. John, Thomas, and I are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And I want to give an opportunity for Thomas and John, if you want to add anything or share anything before we go into questions, or if you just prefer we open this to the board.
Yeah, just so the board is comfortable, we're approximately 87% complete with the project right now. The interiors on the maintenance building have already started. In fact, the maintenance bays were being painted today on the interior. The design team is an integration between the general contractor, Alton Construction, that's already contracted, and the design team, Kimley Horn and Stantec. So we're taking advantage and delivering it under the integrated model process so that we can do a buildability and constructability review to maximize the existing materials we've already procured and have delivered on site, and then upgrade to the fuel cell.
The hydrogen.
Yeah, the hydrogen fuel cell maintenance bays. And the staff here is making a decision to upgrade all bays and not just one bay, which
Okay.
I think is the best decision to make.
For the long term.
Yes.
And I know this board did approve the hydrogen addition amendment to this already. So
Correct.
Yeah.
So we just want you to know that our forecastings are very conservative, and we've been fortunate to be quite accurate within the range thus far. So
we talked prior to, and I saw some pictures of inside, and there's actually paint on the walls and doors are hung. I was like, wow, you are really far down the line. That's really exciting, and can't wait to go there in person. Let me open this up to Vice Chair for a question.
Yes, number one, thank you for the report. And as a former budget guy, I certainly understand the idea that you don't want to come back for a second time of amending a contingency. So I appreciate the strategy. Getting to the hydrogen fuel cell, I also think it would be great if we can retrofit all of those bays. Can we do it with that $200,000 differential? Or if we decide to go all the way, we're going to have a grant come back after all, or how does it work?
that's a great question. Mr. Joseph, I can tell you, we have $350,000 forecasted for it. And the team right now has already started to do their buildability and constructability reviews, because we're about 50% through design development documents. And it looks like the numbers are going to come in under that value. So
But the question is, can we retrofit all 6 bays, or are we too far gone into the?
no,
building?
that's what we're targeting. That's what we're working on. The design is going to retrofit all bays.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Then that is a good decision. So, all right, and theoretically, we'll have 200 grand left over if all goes according to plan. Perfect. That's even better. Thank you.
Yes, Director Doring.
I just want to draw your attention to the unpredictable conditions through completion ask here. You know, it kind of makes me question what you may have already found and maybe don't want to put into this, because we are, as you said, 80%, 87%, I think you said, along, and typically you would be able to have a good feeling for the conditions of the site or anything else there is. So it's in my view, from my experience, that would be an unusual situation. Is there something that we know about already that you're wanting to build into this this ask here, or is it just being very conservative? Because as I say, you're so far along in the project, you would seem to have been to a point where you kind of get a good feel for this site and the existing conditions.
Good question as well. So we calculated it based off of a percentage and average that we estimated in our change order approvals to date. Also, we took into consideration, there have been owner requests, and the scopes in the owner request have been quite large. And the team has done, including the NVTA staff, sitting down at meetings and looking at risk. But the interior finishes, I have monies covered for that, just in case. We also have the EV, the electrical vehicle charging stations, the photovoltaics, that I've set some monies aside for that in that forecasting. The hydrogen fuel vehicle maintenance bays, even though I have 350,000, I always like to have a little extra set aside. So at the end of the day, what do I believe will come out of that bucket? Probably about 125,000, not 300,000.
Appreciate your candor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Grant, remind me, what's the total cost for the facility?
The base bid was about 29.5 million. If,
Okay,
we authorize and use all 3.5 million of the contingency. That'll put us at 33 million in total. But it is likely we will come in under that total value.
great. And square footage again? Total square footage? Or Kate,
I
do you
don't
see
know
me
that
now?
one.
I'm asking, I'm just looking at,
It's
seems
eight-
like a pretty good price, actually.
18,000 plus
Okay.
square feet.
Thank
So
you.
three buildings as well.
Exactly, design, environmental, exactly. Okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions. Do we have any public comment on this?
We do not.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the staff recommendation?
I'm happy to make that motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second? All right, on my left. I got two lights.
Second night.
Okay, second by Knight. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? All right, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. We look forward to the reception when it gets open. Okay, Grant, thank you so much for all those presentations. We're moving on to 11.3. This is also an action item. This is the Transportation Fund to Clean Air Program Manager Fund Program Project List for fiscal year ending in 2024. Diana, you'll be presenting
Chair
this.
Alessio, just excuse me for 2 seconds. I just wanted to make sure staff knew that we're going to lose quorum in about 10 minutes. So
This
speed it up.
this will
okay.
be a really short.
Thank you. Didn't know that
so
either.
short, the
Who's-
shortest report on the longest day of the
Okay.
year.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Chair Alessio. Diana Meehan with item 11.3. This is the Transportation Fund for Clean Air fiscal year ending 2024 project list. For those of you who don't know, Transportation Fund for Clean Air, this is an air district program. The funds come from a $4 surcharge, registered vehicles in the Bay Area. This generates approximately 22 million annually in the Bay Area. 40% of the revenue generated in Napa County comes to us for programming to our local projects. The remaining 60% of those funds goes to the air district for their regional fund program. In this round, we have 249,175. We released a call for projects in March and received 2 project proposals, one from the city of Napa for bike parking and one from the city of American Canyon for vehicle charging stations. Both projects have undergone a cost effectiveness analysis. Both meet cost effectiveness and will be sent to the air districts. Our Technical Advisory Committee did approve the project list at their June 1st meeting. And today we are requesting that the board also approve the fiscal year ending 2024 project list for the Transportation Fund for Clean Air. How's that for speed? I'll take any questions that you have.
You've got a side job as an auctioneer in the future. Are there any questions? Yes.
I was just
Director
wondering if I could send you on a paper napkin some requests from the city of St. Helena
Sure,
for
send them to
charging
me.
stations, bicycle facilities and
Th-
everything
This
else. we can
come,
think
this
of.
does come around every year and oftentimes, you know, we have to program these funds by November 1st each year. If we don't program those funds, we do run the risk of losing them to other counties. That's never happened to date. I'd rather program the funds to our county. So if you have projects on your list, we've actually made that request to the Technical Advisory Committee. public works directors that they, hold an assembled list of projects that are eligible for these funds.
Yes, I'll be following up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing any other questions. Yes, oh, yes, Vice
Just,
Chair.
number one, this is kind of American Canyon's year because we're getting the lion's share of the funds, which I find to be a good thing. But to Director Doring's point, 2 or 3 years ago, I kind of had the same attitude. It's like, we should be getting some of this stuff. So the answer is yes, get those napkins ready and
No, I'm not being critical of the agency. I'm saying we should be asking for it.
Oh, I agree. I'm just saying that's exactly where I was at a couple of years ago. So you'll get yours soon.
Thank you. Okay, any public comment on this item? No. Okay, do we have a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Yes,
Second, Garcia.
and second by Garcia. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any nays? All right. We just have 2 more items, both informational. Thank you very much, Diana. So this is a Vine Transit update. I always look forward to hearing this in this interesting time. Rebecca Shank, and the pages 155 to 164. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair Licio, members of the board. My name is Rebecca Shank. I'm the program manager for public transit. I'm just going to give you kind of an overall transit update. Our quarter does not end until June 30th, so you'll get that quarterly report at the end of the date. But as a result of our board meeting, I wanted to give you a few updates on what we plan on doing. So if you go to the first slide, this is more just an FYI. If you have someone ages 16 to 18 or ages 6, to 18 in your life, we are offering a summer youth pass. You'll see the design there at the bottom. It's $20 if you're want to ride on any route or shuttle from June 15th to August 15th. So it's essentially all the time when school's out. They're for sale here and for sale online. And thanks to Libby Payan for the fun little summer youth path design. Kind of the idea is, right, if you get used to riding in the summer, you'll continue on throughout the year. And then to get to kind of the meat of the issue here, we wanted to go over a little recap of the board retreat options that you had seen specifically for changes that we made to the schedule in August 12th of 2023. So just coming up here in about 2 months, essentially when school goes back into session, although I think St. Helena School District starts a day or 2 earlier. Anyway, this is what we had presented at the board in terms of our different options. And so since the board meeting, we kind of went back and talked internally as a staff, took comments that we received from board members, did an analysis of our ridership, specifically on the Route 10 to kind of clarify exactly the times of day. We might add trips on the Route 10, which is one of our higher performing routes going up to Calistoga. We did some further budget refinement and looked specifically at our fiscal year 2023 budget with Tony, and the budget that was presented today kind of incorporates what we think is our best move going forward for August. And then we took into consideration the transit survey results that we had put forward as part of the board. And so going on to the next slide, kind of what we ended up with and what we are recommending that we would institute in August of 2023 kind of looks like as follows. So this is kind of the overall map, and you're looking specifically at the city of Napa in this case. And we'll go through each of the individual routes here, but basically it looks like we would have 6 fixed routes in total, with 1 on-demand area, which would be shown in gray there, kind of going out towards Browns Valley Road and coming up to California. And people could do on-demand within those areas and or go to either the transit center, which we are now, or up to the Redwood Park and Ride to make the transfer. And so in that respects, with 6 fixed routes and 1 on-demand area, it's very similar to option 1 that we had looked at. And then it's how maybe it's a little bit different though, what we'll go through, as opposed to having right now we have north, south, east, and west. We got back to thinking, okay, how do you add 2 new fixed routes? Do you have northeast and southwest? Like how do you make that work? And so in this way, it's a little bit more like option 3, where we had in January of 2020, prior to COVID, had basically A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. And so what we're going to say now is on-demand area A would kind of incorporate the A because otherwise we don't have an A and you don't want to start with B. And then we would have 6 on-demand routes, which would be the B through G. There's essentially no route H, although that area is served. It's just a little bit more the conjunction of 2 routes. And so going through the individual routes, kind of starting with B, because as we went over, A is the on-demand area. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see specifically the route B. And it's basically a return to the route B from January of 2020. And it's a variation on the west route that we are currently operating. And kind of good news, I don't know if people who were on the board at the time might remember that we were coming on Amola and made the right on Jefferson. We weren't able to make that turn in a 35-foot bus, and we had some unhappy neighbors there on Hartson, but we did kind of do a little trial run earlier today with the 30-foot electric bus, and we can make that turn from Amola to Jefferson. So we won't be disturbing our neighbors on Hartson as shown here, and we can stick to the Jefferson corridor. The next route is the route C in this case, which is exactly a replica of our route N, and we'll be working with Valerie and our other public information sources to kind of get information out about this, but this is essentially the same route that we're activating and operating currently. The next route we have is the route D, and this is the same as the current east route that we're operating, and it will run all day, and its main function will be getting from people from the Shelter and Shirtlift neighborhood. And then on the next slide, we have the route E, and this is one of our new routes that we had shared at the board retreat that would essentially give us coverage up there to Vincennes High School and coverage in the more eastern portions of Napa once you leave the transit center. This closely mirrors what had been the route H in January of 2020. And we think this will be a nice option. It also has service to clinical lay we had reviewed. So this is one of our new routes, would be the E. And then moving on to F. And this very closely adheres to the south route that we're operating currently. What's kind of nice about this is it gives us bi-directional service, so going east and west, going by the Amola Park and Ride, which is one of our big recent investments that I think we're not being able to fully utilize right now because we have limited local service there. We also have a Caltrans encroachment permit in for a better stop on the sidewalk because right now we let people off a little further west in the dirt. So that would give us also better service at the Amola Park and Ride here at the F. And as I mentioned, kind of closely resembles the south route we're operating. And then finally, we would have the route G. This would be our other new route that we had presented at the board meeting. But if you remember, we kind of looked at having a new route that would do this and then go as far south as Napa Pipe. But considering that we have no open developments there at this point, either commercial or residential, there would be the option to extend this in the future, but to the point until Napa Pipe would develop, this would be our route G. And that would kind of bring our full selection. So the routes A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And so what does that look like on the next slide in terms of the service hours? So we're still kind of refining our schedule a bit here in terms of the timing, but we would do about 126,000 service hours. We're currently operating, we estimate in this fiscal year, about 112,000. So an increase in there. And the main increases are basically with the 2 new fixed routes in the city of Napa, going up to Vintage and going down Coombs, and then 4 additional Route 10 trips per day, which will basically give us half-hour service as opposed to hour service at kind of our peak times on the Route 10. And our peak times really there range from about 9 a.m. in the morning till about 3 p.m. In the afternoon. And then we kind of have the breakdown on this at our budget cost at about 13.7 million, and it's divided between purchase transportation and fuel. When we had originally presented the different options at the board, we kind of had purchase transportation and fuel brought together as one item, and we just kind of made a blanket estimate. But this was looking at, because the way TransDev bills us, right, different costs for on-demand versus fixed route, and then looking at how our fuel costs have kind of leveled out. So it is a little bit lower in terms of the cost for this amount of service hours than what we presented the the board, but that's just because essentially we have a real schedule now and we could give you a more refined cost. And it would be about 66 drivers. So we are in the process. That would mean we would need basically 3 additional drivers, 1 for each of the fixed routes, and then 1 additional Route 10 driver. And it would put the vehicles we are operating at maximum service would also increase that by about 3 vehicles. And so that's what we're looking to do for August right now. This is kind of our draft, and happy to hear any feedback that you might have.
Thank you, Rebecca. I know that there was such a driver's shortage. Is that still, a cumbersome issue for Napa Valley Transit?
Sure, it still is a cumbersome issue, but we're continually tracking our missed trips, right? And kind of that, and then we have like our reasons next to them, right? For maintenance or something other. So we've continued to track down on that, and the maintenance and the missed trips that we are having now seldom have to do with, say, a driver shortage and are more based on maybe like a mechanical issue, or so many of our ones in May were on Friday, the 26th. And that's only because it was Bottle Rock weekend, and the traffic getting kind of in and out would sometimes cause you to miss a local route. So if you, I don't know, kind of controlled for that, our missed trips in May were under 10. And so we think we're at a pretty good spot on the driver's side of things, at a good point. And like we said, we are going to try to get a few more drivers in place. But even if, let's just say, if on August 11th, I had the same driver roster that we have now, we could make do with that.
And if I can just jump, since a lot of this is Napa directed.
Yeah.
How often is service for these routes? I'm sure probably varies on routes.
I was
but
going to say it varies
just-
basically on route. So the most frequent service would be what's going to be on that route C, which is our current route N, which always is productive for us, right? Goes up Jefferson, goes west on Trancas, Ralph's Manor and back. So that would be 30-minute service. And then our highest service would be on the vintage route at about 60 minutes. But we will be very cognizant when we do that to make it work with vintage bell times. And so it will give us the opportunity, again, it's not optimal. I know on that particular route, Kate's always like, okay, what could we do on that one? But trying to say, okay, we give you fixed route, and this is the number of hours and drivers and I have, and this is what I can deliver every day. But if we have these routes established, and let's say, we're in a good position, both driver and budget wise, say at a January timeframe, it was very simple to say, okay, we're going to increase the service on this. It doesn't require some type of major change. We obviously have to rebid it just because of how it works with our drivers. But I think this will give you a good structure of which to build on.
And if I can ask a follow-up, how does this compare to pre-pandemic service?
Yeah, so we were at 144,000 hours is not what we had seen in the fiscal year, but what we would have been on track to do if we operated the January 2020, like throughout the rest of the year. So that's what that was looking like. And I think Kate had mentioned in the introductory.
87.5%
we'd
of
be-
our hours
Yeah.
that we're restoring, which is big.
Yeah.
So we had been down up to like 22%. And so now we'd only be down 12.5% or so from where we had
Okay.
been pre-pandemic.
And that timing, this service, I just want to, what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say is I want more service
Right.
for people to know that they can pick up the bus. And if they think they might have missed it or didn't know if they missed it, they're not even going to try.
Yeah.
They
And I
need to
think
know
that's
it's going to
huge.
be there, and it's there on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely an objective. The only thing that I would add to this conversation, and it's so central to the work I'm doing on the statewide effort to deal with the fiscal cliff.
Yeah.
But we need more operating funds. We're going to hit up against a budget constraint before we have any other constraints. And we need our legislators to be out and really pounding pavement to help us identify where those new revenues are going to come from. Transit is a very meaningful solution to climate change. It's essential to create mobility, but it's not very convenient for busy people. And we need to make it convenient for them. And that's the only way that we can do that.
Yeah, it's also challenging for the vulnerable, whether it's the older population that has mobility issues, or folks with chronic disease. They can't wait a long time, or it's just not, it doesn't meet up with their special needs too. So yeah, it's a tough place to be in. Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate your efforts.
Yeah, and just to kind of bring it outside of Napa, that's, I think, what we're really trying to do with the Route 10, because it's one thing, maybe, let's say, okay, well, I missed, say, a route and I was going to get on at Jefferson and Trower, but I might have the option, oh, I could catch this, let's say if you're mobile, right, further south at Jefferson and Trancas. But if you're on the Route 10 and you are in Rutherford or you're in Oakville or you are at Bothay State Park, right, there's no other bus or real quick, like, oh, I'm going to jump over 6 blocks and I can get that. And so that's why we are trying to increase the Route 10 service, because there aren't any other options out there. So we are trying to put some of the resources that direction for that reason.
I appreciate your thoughtfulness. Any other questions? Yes, Director Cottrell.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a question actually on the Route 10. You'd mentioned moving to that half an hour interval. And is that just for peak or is that through the whole day?
It's just for peak. So we're basically adding 4 new round trips. And what we did basically is we looked at, okay, we have currently hourly service. And so we looked at what are the 4 trips currently where we have the highest ridership, and then basically divided that hour into a half hour. And so it'll get us from 15 trips a day to 19 trips a day. So definitely not something that we can do all day at this point. But if the Route 10 would continue to perform well, that'd be some resource exchanging we could look at doing.
Thank you. Oh, yes,
One
Vice
other-
Chair.
Just for my information on the bus shelters, a lot of them have those little electronic readers that'll tell you your bus is coming in 5 minutes. Is that kind of the standard? Do most of the shelters have that?
They do not know. They don't have, say, the electronic sign that would say, oh, this is the countdown. They do on all of the bus stop signs. It has a number that you can either text or call. And that basically takes you to the same database that, say, Google is looking at, and it says, okay, your bus is going to be here in 5 minutes, or that bus has passed. And so you can get at all the bus stops, kind of get the real-time information that way. We are looking to replace all of the real-time signage here, and we're hoping to execute that once we have what's called these transportation improvement funds programmed in the TIP. So the TPI funds programmed in the TIP. And that will give us the option to replace the signs here, replace the signs at the Redwood Park and Ride and the Amola Park and Ride. So that's kind of where we're looking at in the short term. And then maybe once we get those and we have a decent person or decent contractor that we're interested in using, we could expand that a little bit more.
Okay, because that seems like at least a reasonably easy way to kind of reduce that uncertainty. And
Yeah.
even
It's
if
a
you're
good
running late, you know it's running late
Yes.
versus
Yeah.
I missed it, so I'm going to walk home now.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there's a few different options. If you have the non-smartphone, you can kind of do like the call in that I'm talking about at each stop. And then if you have a smartphone, if you look like on our website right now, you could see like where the Route 10 is. And if you're GPS enabled on your phone, and you just have to, enable that, you can see, oh, this is where I am and this is where the bus is. So you do get the kind of answer right there. Whether or not it's the answer you're looking for or not, I can't guarantee you, but you do get the answer.
Yes, Director Eisenberg.
Is the location of the buses available on the Ride the Vine app?
So we have 2 apps, and this is always tricky. So on the Ride the Vine app, you can use that to make any reservations on the Calistoga shuttle, the St. Helena shuttle, the Yountville B, or the American Canyon Transit. So yes, you can see those vehicles on the Ride the Vine app. You have to go to the Transit app, which is kind of a more universal app, to see the fixed routes, for example. So to see the Route 10, the Route 11, this is something that I would love to see melded into one. But for example, when we went out for the Ride the Vine app and we got 6 bids on that, we had asked that question as an optional item, like, can you put them both in one app? And the answer was no from those 6 or 7 firms. And we asked that same question when we went out for our fixed route for the CAT AVL that basically shows the real-time information there. We got 13 bids on that one, and all 13 said no. So if you find someone who can do that for me at a reasonable price, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Well, this was informational. It really was very helpful too. So thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for your continued hard work in this area. We have our final item, which is the 11.5. This is informational. Kate Miller is going to provide a federal and state legislative update, pages 165 to 182.
Thank you so much. So real quickly, the debt ceiling is behind us, which, as you know, eclipsed just about everything else in Washington for very long time. But part of the deal was to rescind unobligated coronavirus response and relief supplemental appropriations act funds, of which many of those were transportation related. This act is otherwise known in circles as CRISA. So that had to be all obligated by June 3rd, or those funds would go away. And Caltrans and the California Transportation Commission staff came together to amazingly obligate within like 1 week, almost $500 million in unobligated CRISA funds. I do not know the details of that, but that's like a small miracle. 43 million of those funds were actually Bay Area funds. So that was good news for all of us. NVTA only had about $75,000 of funds that we didn't even know we actually were awarded. They were or part of the CRISA funds that came from the San Francisco Bay Area, urbanized area, which we've never gotten before. But anyway, it was $75,000 of additional funds, and Tony was able to put that in a grant and secured those funds prior to June 3rd. There are two bills that staff is following right now that are really germane to our operations. One is HR. This, we don't follow federal legislation too often, but HR 1500 would restore public agencies' ability to use third-party data, including cell phone data, to improve transportation. That was taken away from us about a year ago. We use that for our travel behavior studies. There's other ways to do that, but the data is not as robust, and so we would really like to see that passed. The other bill is HR 3317, which would allow transit operators to purchase buses from state-owned domestic manufacturers such as BYD, the B bus, the Butterfly bus, those are BYD buses. BYD is one of the manufacturers that I think one of the few manufacturers that produce a quality 30-foot electric bus. So we would like to see that passed as well. On the state side, the memo noted that Governors May Revise did not include funding to address the looming fiscal cliff, but instead included a message that that the administration would be open to discussions with legislators to address this. And on June 11th, the Senate Assembly reached a two-party agreement on the fiscal year 2023-24 budget bills, SB 101 Skinner and AB 101 Ting. That includes significant funding for both transit capital and transit operations. The bill would restore $2 billion in general fund to support the transit and intercity rail capital program. We call that TIRCIP. And that would bring the total amount of TIRCIP funds for a 2-year period to $4 billion. I would note that the TIRCIP program has a 30% carve out for Southern California operators, and that carve out would be applied to the supplemental funding. And on top of that, MTC has already programmed a lot of those funds, their funds, for Bay Area capital projects. So the TIRCIP funds do not provide sufficient aid to Bay Area transit operators. The two budget bills also appropriate $811 million towards a $1.1 billion commitment for zero emission transit capital program. And so both the TIRCIP and the zero emission transit capital program, both typically used for capital, operators can flex them for transit operations during this period. So that really does help the overall statewide challenge. I would only emphasize that the Bay Area's challenge is significantly more in terms of because they were very high fare box funded systems. And it's not a super big fix for us, but it's better than nothing. And additional work is underway. Also, MTC, I think, is looking at other ways to free up some of their funding to help out the big operators in particular. So BART, AC Transit, and Muni are probably the three big ones that need the supplementary funding. So all these funds will be distributed on formula, and the legislature is going to supply some sort of accountability measure. And depending on how much money NVTA would receive and the burden associated with that accountability, we will probably come back to you and you provide a staff recommendation on whether or not to accept the funds. So we'll stay tuned. I don't anticipate NVTA is going to get a significant amount of these funds, because the need is so high in the central parts of our urban areas. The legislation will also relax the Transportation Development Act fare box recovery requirement and the state transit assistance efficiency measure. So we will be able to, I don't know how the details of that, it's not in print, but we think it's maybe, the ask was a 3-year suspension of those. We think probably we'll get a 2-year suspension. And then finally, SB 532 was introduced today by Senator Weiner, and he is proposing to increase Bay Area bridge tolls by $1.50. This would be a temporary increase for 5 years, and that funding would go towards transit operations. And no news on who supports that and who doesn't. So stay tuned. We'll have more information for you next month. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No? Okay. Thank you again. On item 12, it's future agenda items. Do we have any items for future agenda that you'd like to request? Not seeing any. Okay, then let's go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 3:44. Our next regular meeting is July 19th,